Hello, everybody. We're so happy you could join us for this conversation tonight. It's such a strange and uncertain time, and it's just really nice and reassuring to sort of hang out with other people who truly understand the struggle and who have been connecting with a lot of other parents during this really unusual time. So my name is Ann Douglas, and I am a pregnancy and parenting book author, a mom of four, and a radio columnist for CBC Radio. I'm here tonight just to host this conversation with our two clinicians who are joining us tonight from Luminous. So if you're wondering who those lovely people are at the top of your screen, we have Emma Turner and we have Christina Kocharakal. I practiced this so many times before we went on air, but it is just hard. So Christina, why don't I let you say your name correctly and then introduce yourself to all of us, and Emma as well. You can do that as well.
Okay. I think you did well, and it was Christina Kocharakal. I think the most important part was you added the A after the Christina, so it's great. And so maybe I'll let Emma talk about where we're coming from first, and then we'll get into who we are.
Yeah, sure. So I just thank you everyone for joining us tonight, for taking the time out of your Thursday evening to be here with us. I'm sure all of us, are very busy. There's a lot going on right now, so it's really lovely to have folks here with us today. So as it was said, Christina and I, we work at a place called Luminous Community Services. And so I just want to share a little bit about what our agency is about. So back in April of this year, which feels like a lifetime ago, 4 agencies merged together to make Luminous Community Services. The 4 agencies were Adventure Place, Griffin Center, Skylark Children, Youth and Families, and the Etobicoke Children's Center. And so these 4 agencies span Toronto, the GTA, and so together, collectively, we can serve and better support infant, children, youth, and families. And that very much includes parents and caregivers like everyone who is watching this webinar today. I think one thing that we really strive to do at Luminous, because we are now such a large agency and spanning the entire city of Toronto, we really believe in making sure there's seamless connections for young people and families to get the services that they need when they need it. We want to reduce as many barriers to service as possible. So no matter how big or small the thing is that you're facing, we want to help you with it. And we want to just expand the capacity. We want to help as many people as possible. And so that's really exciting for us at Luminous, that we have the ability to do that. And I also want to acknowledge that, of course, this is hosted by CMHO, and CMHO represents the entire province of Ontario. So I want to just acknowledge that although Luminous is located in Toronto and the people we serve are people in Toronto and maybe just on the outskirts of Toronto, just to know that if you were kind of coming and joining us today from outside of Toronto, that you can check out CMHO's website for more information about where you can get resources like Luminous potentially. But if you are in Toronto and you are interested in knowing more about Luminous, you can go to our website, and it's www.luminous, which is spelled LUMENUS.ca. And you can find more information there about what we do, because we do a lot. So we could probably have a whole hour just about what we do. So that's Luminous. Myself, I am one of the clinical managers in our community mental health program. So I oversee one of the programs that I'm really passionate about, which is our walk-in counseling program. And I just think that this is such an amazing program because it connects people to our services when they need it most. You need to talk to someone today, we can try and connect you to someone today to talk to. So I'm just really passionate about walk-in and brief services, and really happy to be here tonight and supporting all of you. Christina.
Yeah, I want to echo as well that I'm so grateful and honored to be here with all of you on a Thursday night. And, you know, I don't want to take too much time where we could be answering your amazing questions to talk about me, but basically, in a nutshell, what Emma was talking about, that program about walk-in, that's where my heart and soul is. That is what I'm, like, that's technically my title, like the walk-in therapist, that I do that majority of the time. I would not want to do anything else if I could. But yeah, the reason why is because I truly hold the belief that people have the resources within them, families have the resilience within them, and they just need that 1 hour of great conversation with someone like me, to kind of pull those out and then walk away with some things to try that could make all the difference. So that's what I love about the walk-in.
Well, it is not hard to figure out why Children's Mental Health Ontario invited these particular clinicians to be part of this event, because talk about people who are really passionate about their work and inspired. I mean, by Thursday night, it is hard to be peppy about anything, and look at the two of you go. Now, just in terms of housekeeping, because I got so excited, I started talking and I forgot to tell everybody this off the top. We are recording this webinar, which is good because then it is available for future reference for people. And one of the people behind the scenes wanted me to tell you that just by registering for this event, that you will get a link to the playback for later on, along with some additional links and resources, because basically that's what Children's Mental Health Ontario is all about. It's about, you know, sharing information with people out there so that they have it on that day when you are feeling like you're at your wit's end and you just want, you know, some materials or some next steps for yourself. Now, in terms of how things are going to go tonight, I'm going to play the role of, you know, webinar host, and I'm going to keep the conversation moving along. And we received a lot of questions from people, really great questions, and we've kind of clustered them into 4 major categories. So if you submitted a question ahead of time, you're probably going to see us either address it directly or in a general enough way that please know we were also including you. So we sort of have 4 buckets full of questions, like 4 different categories. One's about, or one set is all about sort of, you know, getting to a place of being a little calmer yourself as a parent. The next batch of questions are about dealing with your child's anxiety, how to help them with that. Then there are some pandemic related questions, and finally some questions about handling concerns about a child's anger and negativity. And I know that some people behind the scenes are monitoring the, you know, the chat box. So if you have any questions or concerns or additional issues you want to raise, they're going to keep an eye on that, because I do not have the kind of brain that can read comments and speak out loud. I could never make it as like a, you know, a television host. I don't have that skill set. I know myself. So let's dive in and start talking about some of these issues. And just to make it fun, I'm just going to sort of say what the thing is, and I'm going to let Christina and Emma signal with one another and figure out who's going to jump in and so on. So talking about sort of setting the emotional tone for your family as a parent, could you talk a little bit about how we as parents do have the opportunity to maybe dial back the level of anxiety a little bit just by sort of managing our own emotions? And you can see from my energy level that calm is not my natural habitat, but I do try to visit it on a regular basis. So over to you guys for some input on that whole thing.
Yeah, I think, Emma, like we were talking earlier about how everyone's in a different place and the situation itself is just really hard. So I don't know if you wanted to kind of address that part first about like just acknowledging that we're all in a really tough spot right now.
Yeah, we were kind of reflecting on this part about emotional tone and just what is sitting with everybody during this time, and just wanting to acknowledge that, like, let's just all take a breath right now and recognize, holy smokes, you know, what is going on right now. It is just so, I mean, I think we've heard this word many times, it's just so unprecedented for this time, our generation, our parents' generation, our kids' generation. Like, we're all kind of learning as we go through this. And I just want to invite everyone to kind of take a breath and just be really gentle with yourself as you start to, as we learn together through this. And I really hope as well, or we really hope as well, that just the fact that you're coming here today, you know, I can see that there's 21 participants here today. We know that there were more that registered. I think even that is just a representation that you're not alone in this, and that just knowing that sometimes can also make a difference. So we just wanted to acknowledge that, and just, yeah, set the tone for this conversation, right?
And I think you know, jumping off of what you're saying, Emma, like connecting to what you just said, Anne, about like what can we as parents do, like what Emma just did for me, for example, just now, was like a reminder, like, right, this is hard, right? And that right feeling that you get, I always say, is that validation. And I think that is what parents can do. They can validate for themselves that this is a lot, and that the anxious feeling makes a lot of sense. And then they can hopefully do the same for their young people in the house. So you know, listening to their anxieties, listening to what it is that they are anxious about, or worried about, or stressed about. We could probably place a blank there and fill it in with anything, and do that piece of validation. Like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense, you feeling this way. Yeah, this is really hard. You know, I feel it too. Like, making it relatable. I think that's how I would address that question. And does that make sense?
It really does. And I just wanted to jump in here and just say how much I appreciated that the two of you would, off the top, acknowledge that every family is dealing with a slightly different set of circumstances. And, you know, I think it also helps to acknowledge that, because, you know, you might know another family who seems to just be, you know, coasting through the pandemic with few road bumps, but your situation is different. And so don't compare yourself. Don't feel like you're doing it wrong. Just say to yourself, I'm doing the best that I can in a really difficult situation. Like, that is a sort of like a personal mantra that has carried me through so many times. So I just think, like you both said, that sense of gentleness, self-compassion, and extending that to your child as well, because just as it's a really hard time to be a parent, it's also a really hard time to be a kid, right? So I don't know if you guys had anything else you wanted to say on this, or if we should you know, dive right into anxiety, because there's so much to talk about when it comes to anxiety. So
yeah. Go for it. I think a lot of parents have, like we said, had amazing questions. So
yeah, I think what I might do, because like, if there was like a favorite emotional flavor of the night, it was definitely anxiety. So I think I might just sort of like give you, like, you know, and for people who haven't seen the list of questions that came in, just like the flavor of what is on other parents' minds, because I think that in itself can be really validating, right? So people were wondering about things like how not to heighten a child's anxiety while still being honest about what's actually going on, how to get kids to open up about what they're thinking and feeling, and quiet kids in particular, how to encourage a child to ask for help with remote learning, because we know that's a major source of stress when they're worried that the teacher is going to think less of them, or the other kids will say, you know, that kid doesn't know what he's doing. Dealing with anxiety about wearing of masks, dealing with like tech challenges that are happening behind the scenes, and, you know, how to support children in learning independently or not, as the case may be on a particular day, right? Dealing with separation anxiety when kids don't want to go to school, and just dealing with the anxiety that stems from the fact that the rule on Tuesday was this, and now the situation has changed and it's different on Wednesday. How do you help your child to feel capable of coping with all those curveballs? So basically, I've given you a 10,000 word essay question to both answer verbally. So go.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, for you, I mean, I'll just say, and then we'll just bounce around. How about that?
Yeah,
Christina?
go ahead.
I think one thing that kind of maybe builds off of what we were just talking about with respect to how parents are feeling, And I just, I think it would make a lot of sense to me that a parent, like we're all human in this, that a parent would have their own anxieties and worries about what's going on, about sending their child to school, not sending their child to school, making that decision day by day, balancing lots of other things, work, no work, whatever it might be. And just to know that a lot of anxiety can be, it can rub off perhaps a little bit, and just to kind of ask parents to ask themselves about, where am I at today? And then kind of being able to engage in a curious conversation with their kids about how they're doing, but it coming from a place of genuine curiosity rather than from an anxious place of, are you okay? And I think that it kind of goes back to that previous part about emotional tone, and going back to thinking about what is it that you need to feel to take a breath so that you can be next to your kid and just be really open and curious with them. So that's the first thing that kind of is coming to my mind when I'm just thinking about anxiety in general, and how to talk to your kids about anxiety, is kind of checking in with yourself first.
Yeah, I think that's probably spot on in terms of, when I just hear the word anxiety, I immediately go to curious, because everybody's experience, everybody, even children, of anxiety is different. I have not, in all the years I've been doing this, met one person who gave me the exact same definition as a client before. So I think it's so important to just be curious about what that feeling is for that young person. The other part I'll add is that it totally depends on the developmental age and stage of your own child. So, I heard that first question, how do I not heighten? Well, where is your child on the developmental stage? One of the things that you could do for a younger child is not give detailed information, because their brains can't understand. But for an older child, I might say, give appropriate amount of information, because the less information they have, the anxiety just goes heightened. Mm-hmm. So sometimes that anxious feeling, like I always show to parents, it's great that this is video so you can actually see what I'm doing. Like, this is the brain. And then when we say, don't worry, or you don't have to think about that, or that's not right now what's happening, the brain just goes, freaking out. Mm-hmm. But the second that you give it information, it goes, okay, that makes sense. And then it lessens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think on top of that, I think other kind of okay, so we were now giving young people age-appropriate information, and coupled with that is we also want kids to have the sense of a sense of safety and security with their parent or caregiver. So no matter what the information might be, whether it's, I know it's really hard, and, you got to go to school, and I know you have big worries about that, or I know you're really going to miss me because we've had such a wonderful 6 months together at home. And you got to spend so much time with me, and it makes so much sense, and you're validating them. It's that connection and that security that your child is now getting the sense of, oh, you see me and you understand me, you know my feelings, and you're looking out for me. That's the kind of feeling that they're getting. So I'm thinking, like, there's information being given coupled with, and I'm holding you in this. Yeah.
I'm holding you. Exactly that. And I'm a practical person. I'm a mom who wants to know, okay, what do I do with that? That's great, Christina. You're telling me to to be there for them. You're telling me to validate for them, but what do I do? I love scripts. So something I might offer to say is like, wow, you really are going to miss mommy. I totally going to miss you too. What do you think we can do together when you come home from school? That would be just for us, special time, 5 minutes when you get home. That gives them something to look forward to, and that will ease that anxiety of missing out on the time that you have together.
Mhm.
That's just
I'm
such a
just
lovely, warm feeling just hearing you say that. And yeah, I think what I find really helpful, just as somebody who has four young adults now, not little kids, is when I be in the heat of the moment of parenting, remembering what it was like to be that kid and what brought me that sense of peace. And sometimes I really wanted somebody to rush in and help me solve a problem, and sometimes I just really wanted them to, like you say, to see me, to honor my emotions, or even just to lean up against them on the couch. Sometimes you just want that connection with your person, especially
Yeah.
right now, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Yeah.
with that uncertainty piece, because I know that's something that every single conversation I've had with parents for the last 6 months, that keeps coming up over and over again. And I know I hate uncertainty. I don't have the kind of brain that just says, oh, go with the flow. No, my brain fights the flow, and I have to, work on that a lot. What would you say to other people who struggle with the uncertainty and who just want to know, like, tell me that on such and such a date, this is what my life is going to look like?
Yeah. Emma loves this question.
I do. Well, I mean, I think that one, just to normalize, that makes so much sense because we are creatures of habit. We thrive in predictability. Kids thrive in predictability and consistency. So no wonder that when met with uncertainty, we're gonna, it's gonna be a lot for everybody. And so I think one thing that, Christina and I were chatting about earlier was to think about there's to think about what is in our control and what is not in our control. And it's a muscle to be exercised to do that. It's not something that's going to come quickly, but when you start to reflect on what can I do and what just is simply out of my control, and then inviting some acceptance towards this part that is not in our control. And it doesn't mean that we have approval of that. It's just that we're accepting that there are just things about this that I can't control. And the more I try and fight that and spin my wheels to try and change that fact, the more exhausting I'm going to feel. So I would suggest to turn more to looking at what is in my control, even if it feels something small. Even when we focus on something small that's in our control, it gives us a sense of I guess, autonomy to our lives and feeling like we can do something. And so even if it's like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the example, you know, so it might be that things like we can't see grandma and grandpa as often as we'd like to. And that's really hard. And again, it's validating that that's kind of maybe how it is. But what is in our control? Well, maybe there's a way that we can get grandma and grandpa on Zoom and see them that way. It could be something like that. I know it's a really kind of small example, but again, it's kind of just taking your energy and focusing it and putting it into something that you do have control over, because it's true, there are lots of things about this that are uncertain and that are out of our control.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think one thing I might chime in, and then I'll not pretend I'm a clinician, which I'm not, but I sometimes like to remind myself that one of the gifts of being human is that we have the ability to think about our thinking and to direct our attention in a conscious way. And there are days when I am as guilty as the next person of doom scrolling, like they call it, where, you just read like 10,000 pieces of bad, panic-inducing news. And then I have to say to myself, I think that's enough. I actually think you will sleep better tonight if you don't go to 5 more COVID-19 stats pages before bedtime. So it's a bit of an extreme example, but it does show that sometimes we can say, my brain will be happier if I read my novel before bed. And that is very much in my control, which stack of reading I'm reaching for, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like the only thing I would add to that, I remember creating this resource that Em and I worked together on with another colleague of ours. And I remember being very clear right from the very beginning. I don't want the word choice anywhere in this, because for some people, it doesn't feel like a choice, or it really isn't a choice. And so what I prefer is to say, like what we were talking about in the beginning, this is a situation that you found yourself in today. Mm-hmm. And if you can do that as a parent, then you can be in a better position to understand and do that empathy piece for your child, to say, you're absolutely right. Yesterday, this was the rule, and today it's completely different. Things are changing, and it's very confusing, because yesterday, I, as a parent, felt really comfortable sending my kid to school. And then by 10 o'clock a.m., I changed my mind again. You know, and that's just the reality of how this is playing out. And it's okay to be in that position. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to doubt yourself a million times a day. Because I think really and truly what that shows is your value of how much you care as a parent. And I wonder then, the things that your child is focusing on, of what they can't control, what's so important about that for them? What are they valuing? You know, maybe it is, okay, yesterday I was able to be playing tag with my friend, but today that's not allowed. Well, be curious. What was important about that for them? Well, we got to run around, and we got to play, and we got to connect, and that was fun. And it made me forget about this for a little while. So then you can validate that. Like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So do you think it would make sense to move on to some pandemic related questions? We don't have a huge number in this bucket, but they are good ones. So people want to know how to empower kids to take precautions wherever they are, and in all kinds of different situations, which could be, you know, blended families where you might be moving between households, or, you know, any number of situations. And also the issue of isolation. How do you support a child who doesn't really have a lot of contacts in their bubble, or a very small bubble with only one friend? Maybe they have a family member with a medical need, or, you know, for whatever reason that child is in isolation, and it can be really lonely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely. I think the empowerment piece, if I can start there, is going to be a lot about what you as a family talk about. So maybe you as a family will talk about why it's important for you to follow a certain set of rules. And I think you had mentioned something about a blended family. And so the parents in those situations would then first come together and say, like, hey, what can we agree on? Because I think when I work with blended families, that's the first thing I say. I was like, okay, so things between the two of you didn't work out. That's okay. It happens. However, you also have this child that's going to connect to you still. So when it comes to parenting and co-parenting, the success comes from how can you both agree to be on the same page. So I think that would be where I would start with the empowerment piece of how can the parents feel empowered to be on the same page, and then communicate the same message in any situation. That way, Emma was talking about consistency and what was the other C word?
Predictability.
Predictability. That is so important for a child's brain, and for me, for sure. So, you know, like, if parents can feel empowered to do that consistency, being super clear about their expectations or what their values are as a family, I think that's how you can then get the child to feel empowered to do the same. Mm-hmm. That second piece about the isolation, like, I think, again, we can all, I think this is maybe one of the first times that all of us are in the same boat at the same time. And so we can empathize with that piece of, you know, we used to be able to connect with so many more people, or there were opportunities to connect with so many more people. And now that that's been shifted. What I will say is that quantity does not always equal quality. So in that one person support, if that child is getting really great connection, I say take it as a win.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to know too that while of course a child hanging out with a peer, it might feel different from hanging out with their parent. They get maybe different things. You are there with your child and you can connect with them. You can play with them. You can let their imagination, go wild, and you just follow along with them. You can be that social connection for them. And so I think that while it's might not feel like the same, I think being there and connecting socially with your child can make a difference and can be the thing that they need during this time.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about when you were talking about that, Emma, like people would come to me with like their children, like their little itty bitty ones, the toddlers, and be like, oh my gosh, like, are they just going to be completely screwed up because they're not socializing? That was a real worry, or is a real worry for parents. And what we know is that, well, you as a parent are still a human being. You're not a robot. And so you are socializing with the child. And maybe that means that you have to, at some times during play, pretend to be a child so that they know what it's like to interact with another child. But yeah, like it's still possible for them to get that socialization and connection with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very wise. So I think maybe I always feel like I'm going to cut you off when you're about to say another brilliant thing, because there just seems to be an endless font of brilliant things, but maybe we'll pivot and talk a little bit about anger and negativity. I think I might just give you like the first question or comment in isolation, because I think there's a lot to say about that. And the parent had said, how do you respond to comments like, I hate COVID, or this entire year is stupid, when your child is just being, very outspoken or very vocal about how they're feeling? How would you respond to that? And why might it be hard for a parent to respond to that at times?
Mm-hmm.
I hate COVID too. Just like I think we can be honest with our kids, like, and say like, yeah, this sucks. I think all of us feel that way. And this year is stupid. I think I would again say like, I hear you, kiddo. Tell me. And then that's where the curious could be, to really let them feel heard, like they have a space to share their truest, most honest, vulnerable feelings about it. And that will mean the world to them. So yeah, like, tell me what you think is stupid. I hate that I couldn't hang out with my friends, or I couldn't celebrate my milestone birthday the way that I wanted to. And then you can, as the parent, you would just say, yeah, that does suck. I can see why you're saying that.
Yeah, I think too. No, I was gonna say, I almost want Christina, you to share, because you were the one who said it too. We were chatting earlier about some of these questions. I'll just be transparent about that. And I just really like the way that Christina talked about this, and it was the piece around, I think sometimes it's really hard to be with our kids. Be with our kids when they're feeling hard feelings, whether it's sadness, anger, upset, and it's because obviously we don't want them to feel this way. Those are really hard feelings. And so I think we named it as like icky, like when they're just like, oh man, I want to save you from this. I want to protect you from this. And so I think sometimes parents, we want to feel like we need to swoop in and we need to take that feeling away. We need to gloss over it. We need to, do something about it. When in actual fact, we kind of need to sit next to our kids and just be with them. Just like that beautiful image that Anne had of just leaning up against your parent, like giving a child a space to just, because it's an emotion. We're allowed to feel angry. We're allowed to feel sad. These are things that are a part of our human experience. And I think a big part is just, yeah, that validation that Christina was talking about, rather than trying to fix it. I think we want to fix it because maybe we don't want to feel that way and we don't want our kid to feel that way. And so again, that swooping in happens. So just an invitation to, again, kind of take a breath, and just validate, yeah, this is really hard. This isn't the ideal year. This isn't what we wanted. And that makes sense that you're not liking this, and that's okay. That makes sense. So yeah, I think that it can be okay to sit in that feeling. And then Christina, did you want to talk about hope a little bit?
Yeah, I was going to add the part that I said, the part that I said was to sit in the ick with them. That's what I always say to the parents. Can you sit in the ick with them? Because the messaging that we can give to our kids when we do that is, you're experiencing a hard time. You're having some big feelings. Guess what? I love you and I can handle it. I'm here with you. You don't have to go through that feeling alone. Because when we gloss over it, because, as Emma said, it comes from the most loving place as a parent. You're like, I don't want them to feel any of that. It's yucky. And so we try to pull them away from that, which unfortunately gives the message of, man, I can't handle that. So we're just not gonna do that. And the piece about the hope is, how the conversation can progress. So, again, I hear those parents in the back of my ear. Okay, so I validated them. Now what? So, and that's the now what. You can say, okay, well, what was important about the things that you missed out about for you? What did you feel like you didn't get to do or didn't get to experience or feel? And then you as a parent with them can brainstorm, is there any part of that we can recreate for us, so that you feel like you got some of it at least? It's creating the hope there that allows that moving on. So I think, Emma, one part that you shared with me is like, this is a grieving of a loss, and the grieving needs the time to be heard, needs the time to be shared, and hopefully we as parents can get our own support for ourselves so that we can then do that for them.
Yeah. And speaking of dealing with, losses, one parent wanted to see if you could speak to the issue of what happens if the changes at school have turned a kid off school, a kid who previously loved going to school and now is finding it really unsettling or just doesn't want to go at all. What would you say to that parent?
Yeah, absolutely. That, like I said with Emma too, that's a grieving. There was something about, one of my families told me the exact same thing. I used to be able to go to the computer lab, and now that's shut down because we can't distance in there. That was one of my favorite things about school. Oh, well, how heartbreaking. Like, the one thing that you enjoyed. Can you imagine us going to work and the one thing that we enjoyed, which is probably the coffee maker, was taken away from us? Like, it would suck. So just going from there, getting on their level, understanding what was it about the computer lab that brought you joy. And then that piece of hope, okay, is there any part of what they said that we can somehow incorporate either before school, after school, during school, if the teacher is open to hearing ideas, just so that they can feel like it's not completely lost.
Yeah. And another question, which is probably like one of the perennial tough things of parenting, how do you deal with the fact that other parents have different rules, and that maybe you're telling your child that this is your understanding of the public health rules and this is why you're making these decisions, and then they look out the window and another family is doing things in an entirely different way. It is so hard to be that parent, and it is so hard to be that kid.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, again, it's kind of an opportunity for parents to potentially get pulled in different directions, right? It's considering, your family's values, the things that you feel like are going to keep your family safe, and maybe even extended family members of your family safe. You're considering and holding those things. And then you're also hearing your kid and what they're looking forward to and wanting to be a part of, and witnessing other kids getting to do it and they don't. So there's this tension that then starts to happen. And, I think, we were kind of talking about just inviting maybe parents first, and then maybe opening it up to more of a family conversation, but to reflect on, what are the values that you hold as a family that led you to make the decision that you made? And again, kind of pointing out something earlier that was said, that acknowledging too that these decisions might be being made on a daily basis. So it's good to probably check in with yourself and check in with your family about where are we at today, and how are we making, or what?
Or forced upon you, like the decision was
forced upon you, for sure. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for adding that. And I think too that, so it's reflecting on those values, about what it is that your family, because your family is, your family best, you have knowledge and skill and experience about your family. And so you're going to make decisions from that place. And then it would be a matter of making it into a family conversation about, I understand that you're really looking forward to this birthday party, and this is where we're coming from, and this is what we have to look out for, and I understand that that's hard and that's upsetting. And again, kind of getting curious about what is most upsetting about this. Is it that your friend won't know that you're wishing them happy birthday? Do you feel like you're missing out on a fun play date or something? And really getting to, again, looking at what's in your control, what's not in your control. Maybe there's a creative way for your child to still wish his or her friend happy birthday, or something like that. But I think we were kind of really thinking about it as from a place of what your values are and how you came to make a decision, or how you found yourself in this particular situation when it doesn't feel like an actual decision.
Yeah, exactly. And I think at the end of the day, like Emma and I are all about collaborating with families, and we invite that collaboration to go home in the families as well. So that's why we're, saying, what are your values? How can you share that with your child? And at the end of the day, you still are the parent who has a responsibility to make these calls based on safety for you and your family. And so it might be that they are upset, and they're allowed to feel upset. They're allowed to feel like this isn't fair. And I think at that point, I would invite the parents then to look at what's going on for them. When their child is upset, what message do they hear? Is it a message of, I'll speak on my behalf, I won't speak on other parents, but am I failing as a parent? Am I not being a good mom? Whatever that means. There's all this messaging that could come from the reaction that my child is having. And that's something for me to process and get support with, not for my child to help me feel better.
Right. So we're getting exciting mail in the panelist panel, and I told you I wasn't very good at reading it, but I've sort of caught up on a few messages here. So one parent, I'm just going to throw these out so we can talk about them. One is a parent says, "I feel angry too. Can I say that to my kids?" And on a related note, another parent is wondering, like, you know, we're all doing a really good job of validating. We're becoming validation pros. Should we pivot and then say to our kids, but look, there's a bright side? Should we try to inject an element of positivity? I know we talked about hope, but somebody's wondering about that.
I love the first question. Can I say that? Absolutely, you can say that. The worry that I have sometimes with parents kind of holding it all together and not sharing any of their concerns or worries is that then it leaves the child to think like, okay, what's wrong with me that I'm worried and my parent isn't? And so it's a huge like relatability piece when the parent says, yeah, I'm angry too. Which then connects to this piece of what you're talking about, like when do we pivot? If you felt like you've done the validation enough, so if I think you know your child well enough to sense when there's been a shift in energy. So like you can see that they're not jittering as much anymore. You can see when their breathing has become regulated. When you see that shift, that's probably, or they stop with the, but what about like when they're done with that, that means that they feel heard. Then I think you can do the pivot of asking the question, what are we grateful for today? Or what did we like about the summer together because of the closures? You can ask that. I would only stray away from anything but. So, but look at all the great things that we've done. As soon as you add a but, you negate everything that you just did and you have to start all over again.
Yeah. And I would just add, I completely agree. I really like the emphasis on don't say but. And I think too, just going back to like, can I tell my kid that I'm feeling angry and frustrated? I think I would just invite you to kind of just check in with yourself before you offer that information, because what you don't want is to unload onto your kid, right? Yes. Your kid isn't your peer or your therapist or, you know, your parent. Like you really are, it's more with the intention of letting them know, yeah, like, I get it. I'm frustrated too. And maybe also talking about ways in which you're finding ways to manage your anger. You know, I find I've been going for walks every day. Do you want to come for a walk with me? I find that really helpful with my anger or that sort of thing. Again, as long as it's, you know, age appropriate, whatever it is. So I think thinking about that and yeah, I just wanted to add that piece about how to share your feelings with your kids and normalizing them.
Right. Yeah. We also have a question about a young person, a tween, waking up in the night, not being able to sleep very well because there's so much worry about the health of some family members. So, you know, could you talk a little bit about the sleep piece and how that is, you know, it's like the best thing when you can get it and the most frustrating thing when you can't, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Again, I think that, you know, I think that sometimes when our bodies won't let us sleep, it's because our brains and our body is trying to tell us something, whether it's like, it sounds like in this case, you know, this young person is quite concerned, worried, and it sounds like they really need some sense of safety, security, from their parents. And I think that, again, just maybe going to that suggestion of just being with them in that feeling, recognizing that yeah, I guess one thing that's kind of like is maybe to not necessarily go to a place of like, don't worry, because there might be cause to worry, you know. And maybe it's also just a part of like, you know, I just really want to acknowledge like how much I appreciate the way in which you care and look out for our family and wanting everyone to be okay. And just to know we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure that everyone is okay. And this doesn't have to sit only on your shoulders. And just kind of I'm here if you ever want to talk about it, and just kind of be there and create this space for them. That's the kind of initial thing that's come out for me, but I don't know, Christina, if you have any additional thoughts about that.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you just said. And if you get to know me, you'll know I'm obsessed with brain science. And so the teen brain is totally different from a 2-year-old, 5-year-old brain. And so the teen brain actually is one of those situations where if you don't give information, it's going to go like this.
Mm-hmm.
So as much appropriate information you can share is going to help that brain feel okay again. That's what I would say to that.
Another question is that somebody says that their child doesn't want to go to school anymore because he has to sit in one spot all day long and he doesn't like it. So how could a parent deal with that situation?
Does it say and how old?
It doesn't say how old, but I know, like, just from my
early
experience,
learner.
if it was a teenager, it's going to be a very different conversation than if it's like a 6-year-old, right?
I think
Yeah,
Karen's chiming in saying early learner. So
Early learner, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, early learner. And do you know what that means in terms of age?
Maybe a 4-year-old?
Or okay, so I think this is where I was like, talking with Emma earlier about what expectations are held of our young people. At age 4, they have an attention span of almost 8 minutes to 30, something like that. Like everyone, there's a range because everybody's different. So I can't expect that child to sit in one spot forever. The impulse control of that 4 or 5-year-old brain is much less than a 13-year-old, for example. So the impulse to get out of the chair is so hard to manage. So I think just kind of for that parent to just kind of maybe adjust the expectation, in which case you will adjust what you are hearing from the school. You'll hear it in a different way is what I mean. And then you can then respond to your child in a different way of, yeah, this makes sense. You're not meant to be able to sit for this long. I don't know if that's helpful. Fidget toys, yep.
And we have 3 more questions that all have something to do with a child who has special needs. So I'm sort of just going to put them, all 3 of them out there because we're heading into the home stretch, and I just want you to be able to, to get to all 3 because I think they're really important. One is having a child who arrives at school. He has high functioning autism. He arrives at school, he starts getting really frantic and has a meltdown, willing to go other places, but not to school. So that's one scenario. Another is a 14-year-old with ADHD who's spending a lot of time on, on his phone and so on. Obviously a very bright child because he's been researching a lot of world issues, and now he's really anxious about the state of the world, climate change, and doesn't feel like there's any point in doing schoolwork because there is no future. I tell you, I have days like this guy. And the final one was, I might have to scroll my eyeballs here. I guess just really intense separation anxiety would be the other one, like to the extreme where it's completely interfering with a child's ability to function. What would you say to these parents who are dealing with above average challenges during an already extraordinarily challenging time?
My heart goes out to all of those parents, and thank you for your questions. I guess one thing, the first one that you were mentioning about meltdowns at school and that they don't happen anywhere else. I mean, the first thing that kind of comes in my head is why? What do we know about those other places that don't invite the meltdown? And what is it that we know about school that might be inviting the meltdown? What has changed perhaps with school that isn't sitting well for this young person? that they are having, you know, a response to it that feels really big, because it probably feels really big for them, and they are really wanting to let people know, this isn't okay for me. There's something here, something going on that isn't fitting for me right now. So I think that would be my first kind of question or curiosity is, you know, what do we know about the spaces and places where it's not showing up, and what is it about school that might be inviting that? So that's my kind of first thought about that one.
I would just add one more thing, Emma.
Yeah.
At school, is there a moment when those experiences aren't coming up? And what is it about those moments at school that's allowing that to happen? How can we amplify that?
Yeah. The question around the 14-year-old who is inquisitive and reading a lot, and learning so much about what's going on in the world. I guess I would wonder, well, I'm now having a whole bunch of questions flooding my head right now, which sometimes happens. I guess I wonder, like, how did this young person come to find these particular sites or points of information? Because it sounds like they're quite saturated in negative things that are happening, and not to gloss over things as, you know, climate change and all that, those things are real and really happening. I guess I wonder, like, does this young person have any curiosity around some of the efforts that are being made around the world to improve our environment, to fight climate change, and how, you know, how to access that information? And would that invite any kind of shift in perspective around the information? Not to say that it's going to totally change the perspective entirely, but there is information out there that does demonstrate the things that people are doing to make the world a better place. And so I'd just be curious about how to access that information. I don't know, Christine, have you had things to add?
Yeah, I always add things as a parent. So, you know, Anne, you were talking about earlier how you have to, at one point, tell yourself, I think I need to stop now, and I think I need to read my book. I don't know if you know, those of you out there with teenagers ever experienced this. You hear something that they've done, they've made a decision, and you're like, how did they think that was a good idea? And well, that's because their brain is going through a completely new spurt of change right now, of making connections and pruning connections. Mm-hmm. So that is why there's a scientific reason why they're making decisions that don't make sense to you. And so at that point, it is where you come in as the parent to be that guiding piece, to maybe at some point, and maybe they won't like it, to take away the phone, to put a limit on how much they're allowed to research, to suggest, hey, you've been on your phone for 20 minutes looking at some really intense stuff. Why don't we come over here and read this together instead? Just to kind of also share that responsibility with the parent, because sometimes it really is hard for that teenage brain to be able to do what you're asking.
Yeah.
There was a part I don't remember.
I was going to say really quickly too, it's like how to maybe have conversations about some of these big topics that the 14-year-old is looking into, so that they are not alone in, so they're sitting there, they're reading, you know, through articles, and then just sits with them. That how can we engage in conversations? You know, you might have to do some of your own reading perhaps about things that are going on in the world. Maybe you just get curious with them about, what are you learning? What's standing out to you? What's not okay with you about this? What do you want to do in response to that? You know, and just start engaging in conversation. So that was just the other thing I was going to add. The third one was about intense separation anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, Christina, if you have ideas about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Separation anxiety, especially when I think of like the early years, is always about communicating a need. And so that would be your role as a parent, to investigate what is that need. So, you know, again, when I talk about this particular pandemic situation, they've just especially the younger that they are, they've just had 6 full months of just intense being with you. And now all of a sudden it's like shifted, and shifted in a time of uncertainty. It's not like it's back to, okay, we can fully tell our kids, this is what we know, and there's not going to be any more change. That uncertainty is what's going to create that level of anxiety, because for that young person, their brain feels the safest this close to you because you have done a fabulous job of keeping them safe for however many years they've been alive. That's what their brain is counting on. So if you can imagine this number, 1 trillion, like I don't even know what 1 trillion looks like, but from 0 to 3, that brain is making 1 trillion connections a second. So it's like that, all that information is just jamming into their head that when I'm with this person, I'm totally and completely safe. I have no question about it. When you get past the age of 3, it's maybe not a trillion, but it's still a lot of connections. And so when you've got this early learner, this is a new term I've learned, thank you, that when you've got this early learner that just spent 6 months with you nonstop, felt the most safe there, and they were told it's most safe staying inside, not going outside. Their brain made huge connections about that. And now it's being asked to go against that. So that, I'm just explaining all this just to have an understanding as a parent of what's going on for the child so that you can address the need. So then addressing the need, what does that look like? It could be like, wow, you really want to stay close to me. You really want to feel safe. And that's when you feel safe, when you're with me. This makes a lot of sense. Who do you feel safe with at school? Right? And they can tell you, or maybe they can't tell you, and then that would be a cue for you as a parent. Oh, wow, they can't tell me who they feel safe with at school. I wouldn't want to go there either. So how can we take the steps to have conversations with school caregivers? I know that, again, that's really hard right now, about like how they can feel safe with them there.
Yeah. I just want to listen to you guys talk all night. I feel so soothed every time you start talking about, the love, the connection, the meeting of minds, because it really is like a meeting of minds and hearts, this whole parenting thing, right? And I know we have more questions and comments than we were able to get to, just because it always happens, right? The further you get into the chat, the more people want to ask questions. So regretfully, we are going to have to wind down, and I just wanted to give both of you a chance to maybe give a parting word of encouragement or whatever you want to send out into the world tonight. I'll do the same, and then I think we'll wrap up for the evening.
Emma, do you want to go or?
Sure. All I will say is that I would just say that, again, as I said at the beginning, take a breath, hold compassion towards yourself, towards your family, and to know that you are doing your best with the information that you have today.
Okay. Not fair, she took my
That's why I wanted to go first.
Yeah, I think I would add that piece about we're all going through the same thing right now is kind of the best, because we can truly empathize in no other way that we've been able to do before. And that when you're able to do that for your child, it means the world to them. Truly, they feel so safe when you can truly empathize with them like you can in this moment. And that's going to make them resilient people. And that's what I hold on to in terms of the hope. That's a big word for me. I ask that in every meeting I have with families, so that hope, if you can keep that alive through this really simple but hard thing of empathy, you're doing amazing.
Wow. And to that, I would just say, give yourself credit for everything you've learned over the course of the pandemic. Like, think about on, you know, New Year's Eve last year, the skill set you had and how much learning and growth has happened since, and really recognize and honor your strengths as a parent. If you can't think of them tonight because you're exhausted, ask yourself tomorrow, like, who do I know that's familiar with my parenting that could shine a spotlight on my own unique strengths? And then send a text message to that person, because you might need that little injection of, you know, of rah-rah before the weekend. But thank you so much, Christina, Emma, CMHO, for hosting this, and for everybody who joined us tonight. The good news is the conversation is never really over with our Kids Can't Wait community. We have a lot of conversations online, especially on Twitter. Karen, I don't know if you want to come on camera to make any parting comments or let people to know what to expect next.
And what I've done, I won't turn my video on, but what I've done is I've just left some links in the chat box. Sorry, you caught me with a candy in my mouth.
I'll put a candy in my mouth too.
It's a sugar-free candy for what it's worth, but I left some links in the chat box, but also we'll be sending a video recording of tonight's webinar, and I'll send that to everybody who registered as well. And if it's okay, there are quite a few things that popped up during the chat that I'd like to talk with Emma and Christina about afterwards. So I'll send you guys an email if you can look out for that. And yeah, I know that there's a couple of outstanding questions in there, and let us see what we can, let's put our heads together and see what we can do about that.
And just before you close out, I'm so sorry, I just have to add, and like that piece that you said about, you know, connect with someone and maybe they can tell you what you're really good at or what you learned about yourself. I forgot to mention, like, we were not meant to do this alone. So, you know, if this chat says anything, like how many people registered, how many people are online asking questions, like, you guys are not alone. We are not alone. I am not alone. We're going through this together. And so just to remember that it's okay to reach out for help. And I think, you know, just like a little plug for us, like, there's no question too small. There's no thing, like, you know, if you just think like, man, I don't know if I'm doing this right, give us a call. I'll be happy to chat with you. So yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. Have a good rest of the evening and a decent night's sleep and a great weekend. Bye for now.
Thank you,
everyone.
Bye.